It's kind of wild when you think about it, right? Like, you see Brittany Griner, incredible player, obviously, reportedly earning something like $1.5 million playing over in Russia.
Yeah.
And then you look at a WNBA superstar like Audra Wilson, right here at home, and her WNBA salary, it's somewhere around 200,000. I mean, that's a huge difference, like 7 times the pay.
Yeah, it's a pretty stark contrast.
It makes you wonder, like, are WNBA players basically forced to go overseas in the off season to really cash in, or should the focus be more on trying to get those WNBA salaries up to a level where maybe they don't have to? So that's what we're going to dig into today.
Right.
We're looking at the whole financial side of things, what creates this kind of crazy situation. And we're going to talk about those risks that come with playing internationally, because there are some serious ones out there.
Absolutely, yeah. I think, you see a gap like that in earning potential, and it really forces you to look at the systems that are creating that, right? It's not just about one league paying more. It's a whole ecosystem almost of women's professional basketball globally.
Totally, yeah. And what we've been reading, it seems like one of the biggest things driving this whole salary gap is just how these different leagues, how they work on the money side. A lot of foreign leagues, like especially in China, Turkey, they don't have the same kind of limits that the WNBA has. They don't really have a salary cap the way the WNBA does.
Right.
The WNBA, from what I understand, is like $1.4 million, something like that a team can spend. That's it. That's their cap.
Yeah.
So these other leagues, they can offer these huge contracts to individual players, right?
Yeah.
They don't have that limit.
It's kind of like, if you think about a boutique versus like a major department store.
Yeah.
In terms of their budget, right. So if the WNBA team, they only have $1.4 million to spend on their entire roster.
Yeah.
But then you hear about these players going overseas and making close to that, or even more than that, just individually.
It's crazy.
It really highlights, those incentives that are in play.
It does, yeah. I mean, it's hard to just ignore that difference if you're a player, right? Especially if you're thinking long term, like how am I gonna set myself up after basketball? And this is a career that it doesn't last forever. So now, obviously, this whole conversation about playing overseas, it's definitely changed a lot since what we're calling the Griner effect, right? I mean, after everything that happened with Brittany Griner being detained in Russia,
Right.
It made everyone realize the real dangers that these players can face.
Absolutely, yeah. I think, Griner's experience definitely heightened awareness, right, for players, for the basketball community at large, about those non-basketball challenges that they can face when they play internationally.
Sure.
But what's interesting is that, even with this awareness, we still see so many WNBA players going overseas.
Yeah.
And that, I think, it really kind of speaks to the fact that those financial rewards are just so significant, especially if the earning potential in the WNBA is, just not seen as enough.
Yeah, it's not even necessarily about, like living this super lavish lifestyle or anything, right? I mean, we were reading about Sue Bird's take on this, and it really stuck with me.
Yeah.
She basically said that, the way things are set up in the WNBA right now, like the pay structure, it doesn't really give players a solid enough way to make a good living without going overseas.
Right.
It's about just being able to live comfortably and setting yourself up for when you're done playing, right? It's not just about having some extra cash. So for everyone listening, I'm curious, when you look at it, the money you can make overseas, but then you also see the potential downsides. Like, what do you think? Is it a smart move for these players to play overseas? Is it worth the risk? It's a complicated question, right?
It is, yeah. And I think to really dig into that, we need to go beyond just the money part and look at, all the other challenges that come with playing overseas.
Yeah.
Because it's not just, going to a different place and making more money. There's a lot more to it.
There is, yeah. And one of the things we saw was the schedules, they're brutal, right? Like, imagine you just finished a whole WNBA season, it's grueling, and then you got to jump on a plane, go to another country, and play another whole season.
Right.
It basically turns into, they call it a 12-month season. Like,
Yeah.
you're playing all year round, no break.
It's basically like running back-to-back marathons.
Yeah.
And not really getting the recovery time.
It's got to be exhausting.
Yeah. And the risk of burnout becomes so high, right? These athletes are pushing their bodies to the limit.
Yeah.
They're not getting the rest and recovery that they need to, have a long and healthy career.
Right, right. It's
Yeah.
like, I don't know, it's like you're driving your car and you're redlining it constantly.
Right, exactly.
Eventually something's going to break, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And then on top of that, there's the injury risk. I mean, we saw it with Elena Delle Donne, right?
Yeah.
She missed WNBA games because of an injury she got while playing overseas.
Right.
That's huge,
Yeah.
right? Like, that really shows you how playing year-round can actually hurt their performance back here in the WNBA.
And, that's a really important point because WNBA teams are invested in these players. Fans want to see them playing. And if they're getting injured overseas, it impacts the entire league.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
And then you can't forget about the safety issues, right? I mean, we were reading about, geopolitical tensions, especially in places like Russia and China. Obviously, what happened with Brittany Griner, that's like the worst case scenario. But it shows you that those dangers are real.
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely a wake-up call.
It was, yeah. It shows you that when these players go overseas, they're basically, subject to the laws and the politics of those countries, which can be very different from what they're used to back home.
It's a risk they have to consider, for sure.
And it's not just, those big political things either. We've seen players getting stuck in COVID lockdowns in other countries.
Right.
That's another layer of risk and uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
So when you put it all together, the crazy schedules, the injuries, the safety concerns, it makes you wonder, like, what makes these players keep signing those overseas contracts? I mean, obviously the money is a huge part of it, right? But it's got to be more complicated than that.
Yeah. I mean, if the money wasn't so good, I think you'd see a lot fewer players taking on those risks.
Right.
I mean, their careers are short. They have to make the most of it. And right now, that often means going overseas.
Mm-hmm. Totally, yeah. So this leads to the big question, right? Like, what can the WNBA do about this? Can they really change things so that their players don't feel like they have to go overseas to make a decent living? One of the things we were looking at, it's kind of interesting, is just comparing the WNBA financially to the NBA.
Right.
It's kind of a David and Goliath situation.
It is, yeah. I mean, the numbers are really, they're pretty striking.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about the WNBA generating around $60 million in revenue annually. And then you have the NBA, which is making like $10 billion.
That's
It's a
unbelievable.
massive, massive difference.
Yeah. So how can the WNBA, with that kind of difference in financial power, how can they even try to compete with those overseas salaries? It's a big challenge.
It is, yeah. It's a really big challenge.
So we were also reading about the 2020 collective bargaining agreement, the CBA, right? That was supposed to help improve things. And it did lead to a higher maximum salary in the WNBA, right? It went up to like $234,000, something like that.
Yeah.
Which is great, but it's still way less than what some of these players can get overseas.
Right, yeah. It was a step in the right direction.
It was, yeah.
But that gap is still, it's still very wide.
Yeah, it's huge. And then there's the whole thing with charter flights, right? That was approved in 2023. That was a big deal because, I mean, for years, players were complaining about having to fly commercial all the time.
Right.
It's grueling, right? It takes a toll on your body. So that was definitely a positive step.
It is, yeah. It's definitely a good thing for the players, right? Like, it improves their quality of life,
Yeah.
helps them recover better.
Yeah.
But, it's important to remember, charter flights don't put more money in their pocket.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
It's about, improving their working conditions, which is important, but it's not addressing the core issue of the salary gap.
Yeah, you're right. And this brings us to like a really interesting point that came up in our research. It's something to think about. Like, what if the WNBA made the season longer? Like, what if they added more games? The thinking is, more games, that means more opportunities for players to make money within the WNBA, right?
Right.
So maybe they wouldn't have to rely so much on those overseas contracts.
It's an interesting idea, right? I mean, on the one hand, more games equals more money for the players, potentially.
Yeah.
And it could, maybe make it more financially feasible for them to just stay in the WNBA year-round.
Right.
But then you also have to think about, the downsides.
Yeah.
We were looking at some fan feedback, and one of the big concerns is player fatigue.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, a longer season means more wear and tear on their bodies, less time to rest and recover, and it could actually lead to more injuries, right? And burnout, which is what we were talking about earlier.
It's almost like a catch-22, right?
Yeah, it is. It's a tough one.
So for everyone listening, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Like, do you think a longer WNBA season is a good idea? Would it be worth it for the extra money, even if it means more risk of injuries and burnout? It's a tough call.
Yeah, it is. It's a balancing act, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So to kind of wrap things up here, I think what we've seen is that the WNBA, they really need to figure out how to pay their players more, right? Like, make it a career where they can actually, support themselves and not feel like they have to go overseas.
Yeah, for sure. It needs to be a sustainable career path.
But until that happens, a lot of these players are going to keep going overseas, even with all the risks, because that's where the money is.
Right. Yeah, the economics of it are, they're really pushing players in that direction.
Yeah, it's tough. So this brings us to our final question for everyone listening, and it's a big one. Should the WNBA just say no more overseas play, like actually ban it, or should they just focus on making sure that WNBA salaries are high enough that players don't feel like they have to go overseas?
Hmm.
Both options, they have big implications, right? For the players, for the future of the WNBA, it's a big decision.
Yeah, those are two very different approaches.
They are,
And
yeah.
they would have very different consequences, right?
Yeah,
I mean, banning overseas play, that could potentially mean more money going to WNBA salaries, but it would also probably be very unpopular with a lot of players because they rely on that income.
they do, yeah. And then focusing on WNBA salaries, that's a long-term solution, right? It
Right.
requires the WNBA to really grow financially, which is not easy.
Yeah, no, it's not. So here's a final thought for everyone to ponder, and it's a tough one. How do we solve this problem? Like, what are some creative, innovative solutions that could help close that salary gap between the WNBA and overseas leagues, but also make sure that these amazing athletes are safe and healthy? It's a big challenge, right? It requires like everyone working together, the WNBA, the players, the fans, everyone.
Yeah, it does. It's about the future of the game, really.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's about making sure that these players are valued and respected for what they do, both on and off the court.
Absolutely.
So that's something to think about, right? It's a conversation that needs to keep happening.
Yeah, for sure.
And hopefully we can find some real solutions that work for everyone.
I hope so, too.
Yeah, me too.
For the good of the game and the players.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. It's been a really interesting conversation.
It has.
And I hope you'll, keep thinking about these issues and maybe even come up with some of your own solutions. It's a challenge, but it's one that's worth tackling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Until next time, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.